May 10, 1911, Washington, D.C. The Supreme Court delivers its verdict. Standard Oil Company must be broken up. Split into 34 separate companies. The greatest monopoly in American history, dismantled by a single court order. John D. Rockefeller, the man who built the empire, had retired years ago. He's no longer running the company, but he still owns a quarter of all the shares. And here's the irony. When Standard Oil breaks apart, the value of those individual companies skyrockets. Rockefeller emerges from the dissolution as the richest man in the world. The government destroyed his monopoly and made him even richer. This is the story of how one man controlled 90% of America's oil, became the world's first billionaire, and built a business so powerful that it took the Supreme Court to stop it. From kerosene lamps to gasoline engines. From ruthless monopolist to generous philanthropist. John D. Rockefeller, the man who made competition is a sin. July 8, 1839, Richford, New York. John Davison Rockefeller is born into a modest family. His father, William Rockefeller, was a traveling salesman, some said con artist, who was often absent. His mother, Eliza, was a devout Baptist who raised John with strict religious discipline and frugality. Two influences that would define his life: methodical calculation from his mother, ruthless ambition from his father. At 16, Rockefeller got his first job as an assistant bookkeeper. He loved the precision of accounting, the order, the control. By age 20, he had saved $1,000 and partnered with Morris Clark in a commodities business. Then, in 1859, everything changed. Edwin Drake struck oil in Titusville, Pennsylvania. The oil rush was on. At first, Rockefeller wasn't interested in drilling. Too unpredictable. Too chaotic. But refining? That was a business he could understand. In 1863, Rockefeller and Clark entered the oil refining business in Cleveland, Ohio. Within 3 years, Rockefeller bought out Clark and made oil refining his sole focus. He saw what others didn't. The oil business wasn't about finding oil. It was about controlling the oil that had already been found. In 1870, Rockefeller incorporated Standard Oil Company of Ohio with $1 million in capital. And then he went to work. Rockefeller had a simple philosophy: competition is a sin, and he set out to eliminate it. His method was called horizontal integration, buying up competitors until he controlled the entire industry. In the first 3 months of 1872, Rockefeller bought out, shut down, or bankrupted 22 of his 26 Cleveland competitors. But buying refineries wasn't enough. He needed leverage. The railroads. Rockefeller negotiated secret deals with railroad companies. In exchange for guaranteeing 60 carloads of oil per day steady, reliable volume Standard Oil received massive discounts on shipping rates. His competitors, who couldn't match that volume, paid full price. They couldn't compete. They went bankrupt. Rockefeller bought them out. By 1880, Standard Oil controlled 90 to 95% of all oil refined in the United States. But Rockefeller didn't stop there. He practiced vertical integration, controlling every stage of production. Standard Oil owned the oil wells, owned the pipelines, owned the refineries, owned the distribution networks, owned the tank cars, even owned the barrel-making factories. Nothing was wasted. Even the byproducts that other refineries threw away, Rockefeller found ways to sell. Gasoline? Most refineries dumped it in rivers. Standard Oil used it to fuel its own machines. Heavy residues? Sold as lubricating oil or road paving material. Efficiency, control, domination. In 1882, Rockefeller created the Standard Oil Trust, legal structure that allowed him to coordinate the operations of 40 companies across multiple states. The trust controlled approximately 90% of U.S. refining capacity. One man, one company. Near total monopoly, but empires built on ruthlessness attract enemies. Enter Ida Minerva Tarbell. Born in 1857, Tarbell grew up in the Pennsylvania oil regions. Her father was an independent oil producer, one of thousands crushed by Standard Oil's monopoly. She watched her father's business struggle. She saw neighbors driven to ruin. And she never forgave Rockefeller. In 1902, Tarbell began writing a series of investigative articles for McClure's magazine. Over 19 months, she published detailed exposés on Standard Oil's business practices. Secret railroad rebates, illegal under the Interstate Commerce Act of 1887. Predatory pricing to destroy competitors, industrial espionage. Bribery of public officials, manipulation of markets. Rockefeller called her Miss Tarbell and this poison woman. But her work was meticulously researched, undeniable. Tarbell wrote, Mr. Rockefeller has systematically played with loaded dice, and it is doubtful if there has been a time since 1872 when he has run a race with a competitor and started fair. Her articles turned public opinion against Standard Oil. The robber barons were no longer seen as captains of industry. They were seen as threats to democracy. Political cartoons portrayed Standard Oil as an octopus, its tentacles strangling the nation. By 1880, the New York World called Standard Oil the most cruel, impudent, pitiless, and grasping monopoly that ever fastened upon a country. In 1890, Congress passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, designed to break up monopolies and restore competition. Initially, the law was toothless, used more often against labor unions than corporations. But in 1901, Theodore Roosevelt became president, and Roosevelt was a trustbuster. In 1906, Roosevelt's administration filed suit against Standard Oil under the Sherman Antitrust Act. The charges: conspiring to restrain trade and creating an illegal monopoly through railroad rebates and discriminatory practices, control of pipelines, unfair methods of competition, local price cutting to suppress rivals, espionage and bogus independent companies. A federal circuit court ruled against Standard Oil in 1909. Standard Oil appealed to the Supreme Court. Narration: May 15, 1911. The Supreme Court upholds the lower court's decision. Chief Justice Edward Douglas White delivers the opinion. The court establishes the rule of reason. Not all monopolies are illegal, only those that unreasonably restrain trade. Standard Oil, the court ruled, was unreasonable. The order: Standard Oil must be dissolved into 34 independent companies, split geographically with separate boards of directors. The biggest two, Standard Oil of New Jersey, became Exxon. Standard Oil of New York became Mobil. Others became Chevron, Amoco, Conoco, Sohio, and more. Many of these companies remain among the largest in the world today. By 1911, Rockefeller had retired from active management. But he owned a quarter of Standard Oil's shares, and here's the cruel irony. The breakup doubled his wealth. When the 34 companies began operating independently, their stock values soared. Competition drove innovation. Public sentiment improved. Rockefeller's net worth in 1911, roughly $900 million. Adjusted for inflation, $340 billion in today's dollars. Some estimates, measuring his wealth as a percentage of U.S. GDP, place him at over $400 billion, making him the richest person in modern history. He became the world's first billionaire. By 1916, newspaper headlines declared, Rockefeller, world's first billionaire. Narration: So what does the richest man in the world do with his fortune? For most of his life, Rockefeller had been privately charitable donations to Baptist churches, support for black colleges, funding for medical research. But after the antitrust trial, his public image was toxic. He hired Ivy Lee, America's first public relations consultant. Lee's strategy: reframe Rockefeller not as a ruthless monopolist, but as a benevolent philanthropist. Photos of Rockefeller handing out dimes to children became iconic. But the philanthropy was real. In 1913, Rockefeller established the Rockefeller Foundation with an initial donation of $100 million, about $2.5 billion today. The foundation's mission: to promote the well-being of mankind throughout the world. Rockefeller's philanthropic legacy: medicine, funded Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, helped establish University of Chicago, supported medical research that led to yellow fever vaccine education, donated $80 million to the University of Chicago, founded Spelman College, named after his wife's family, supported black education in the South through the General Education Board Science, Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, now Rockefeller University, funded research that led to penicillin development. By the time of his death in 1937, Rockefeller had given away $540 million, over half his fortune. Rockefeller once said, "I believe the power to make money is a gift from God, to be developed and used to the best of our ability for the good of mankind." Critics saw hypocrisy. Defenders saw redemption. John D. Rockefeller died on May 23, 1937, at age 97. He lived long enough to see the automobile transform America. Standard Oil's successor companies dominate global energy. His philanthropic institutions reshape medicine, education, and science. His legacy is complicated. He built the most ruthless monopoly in American history. Standard Oil crushed competitors, bribed officials, and exploited workers. But he also revolutionized the oil industry. He brought order to chaos. Lowered prices for consumers. Made kerosene, the poor man's light, affordable for millions. And his philanthropy transformed society. Modern medical research, public health systems, and universities owe their existence to Rockefeller money. Today, Standard Oil's descendants, ExxonMobil, Chevron, BP remain among the world's largest corporations. The Supreme Court broke up the monopoly. But it never broke the model. Rockefeller proved something that still haunts capitalism. Monopolies are more profitable than competition. And breaking them up doesn't always make them go away. They just evolve. The Rockefellers remain one of America's wealthiest and most influential families. Rockefeller Center in New York, the Rockefeller Foundation, the legacy endures. But so does the question, can you build something good from ruthless methods? Does the philanthropy redeem the monopoly? John D. Rockefeller was a devout Baptist who prayed every night and crushed his enemies every day. He gave away fortunes while building an empire on monopoly. He was America's first billionaire. And he showed the world that in capitalism, you can be both villain and savior. If this made you think, subscribe. Next video, Andrew Carnegie, the Steel King who gave it all away. Drop one word in the comments if you felt this. Monopoly. See you on the other side.